Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Good Grief. My name is Dr. Christine Malone, and in this podcast, we talk about trauma, tragedy, and survival. In each episode, I will interview someone that has gone through grief in some way, and we will discuss the impact it has had on their life. By sharing these stories, we hope that others won't feel alone should they be going through similar situations. Enjoy.
Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. My guest today is going to talk about some things he went through with parents with issues, I'll say, growing up, and then kind of what he's doing today, how he helps other people with the stuff that he's doing today. So, guest, if you would please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Guest. No, my name is Dylan Moore. I live in Everett, Washington, and I guess that was a very generalized way of describing it. I guess the starting point is having a rough time with your own parents growing up, and particularly when as the child, your interests. I mean, it's not even like they're second place. It's like they're so far down the line.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I shouldn't be laughing about this, but they're so far down the line. I mean, I'll just jump right into an example of this. And a lot of this is going to revolve around my mom. My parents divorced when I was 4.
Mhm.
And my mom got custody. I was able to see my dad every other weekend. And I still hate poodles. I'm not changing the subject. I'm to bring this around to something.
Okay.
I still can't stand poodles, where I understand the second smartest dog, second only to German Shepherds. My mom had this poodle, Princess, that would eat all of my books and all of my toys, and it, like, I couldn't leave my bedroom door open because it would go in and eat everything. And my mom would never do anything about it. And when I was God, I don't remember how old I was, 10, 12, something or other, when that dog finally died. And I was like, oh, the poodle's finally gone. And my mom got a new poodle. So the first one was a standard poodle, which are big. Then she got a miniature poodle, and they named it Prissy. Like, if Princess was bad enough. And the dog hated me. Like the first dog, I mean, there was some tension, but I thought it was bad until we got the second dog. And the dog would just be like, if I was in the room, I couldn't hear anything because the dog would just be barking at me so loud.
Yeah.
And if anyone tried to have a conversation with me, couldn't have a conversation in the house because the dog was just going off the hook whenever I was in the same room as the dog. And my mom would never do anything about it. And it was like I just couldn't even walk around the house without this. I couldn't walk into the door. Anything. This dog would just go off like a fire alarm.
And just you? It was just you? It got along with mom, okay?
It was just me.
It's just you, okay.
Mom didn't do anything about it. And
Okay.
I'd get mad about it, and my mom would just be like, you got to deal with the dog. And someone pointed out to me years and years later is that likely my mom had that dog to show me that I was lower on the hierarchy scale than the dog.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And the dog picked up on that because that's how dogs orient. They're all about who's on the hierarchy scale. The dog understood it was higher up than I was, and it let me know it all the time.
Yeah.
So
have you had experience with dogs since then? Just curious.
So I don't have a lot of patience with them.
Okay.
One thing I will do, because the dogs that always like to stick their nose up your butt or into your crotch or whatever, I will knee a dog in the jaw so fast if it comes, and the owner, what are you doing? Keep it out of my balls.
If it's not well behaved, it's like I am a dog lover. I have 4 dogs, but it's like if my dog gets into anybody's business or jumps, whatever, it's like you got to give him a little whack, like tell him nope.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I don't have any problem giving whacks, or like if I'm walking and they want to stick my nose up my butt, I'll do how do you call it? Like I'll kick my heel up every time I take a step.
Okay.
And so the dog, it gets clipped in the jaw a few times, and then it learns very quickly not to do that to me.
Should learn.
So
this is one guy we don't want to sniff. Yeah.
Yeah. In general, I like dogs, but I do not have any patience with them at all. So I don't think I'll ever get one.
I can see why the poodle would be a thing. Funny thing is, one of my dogs is a golden doodle, so mixed between golden retriever and a poodle. What I love about him is he doesn't shed, but he's also the most gentle of my dogs. So, but
right,
yeah,
well, and they're smart. I mean, that was probably to my detriment that this dog was so smart.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. But anyway, So mom, I know you described her as a narcissist, but tell me what that was. What did that look like? Kind of what
Well, and
did mom do?
let me say why I gave that description. So I must have been like 30 years old when I stumbled upon an online article talking about narcissistic parents, and I had to pick my jaw off the floor after I read it because it felt like they had written it about me.
Hmm.
I'm like, that's so exactly described that I experienced. What was I like a psychology experiment where there's like men in white coats watching me my whole life, going, oh yeah, okay, this is what's happening, and then wrote an article about me. Well, I found out later that narcissism is like they're all like each other. They all exhibit very very similar
Right.
traits, and that's why I felt that connection when I read that article. But it's to and I use this term, I guess, ironically, when I say favorite. My favorite example, I was a cesarean section. So my mom has a big scar down the center of her belly. And I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. So it was a life or death thing. They had to cut me out. And my mom, this was not infrequent. If she wanted me to do something and I didn't want to do it, she would say, well, do I have to show you my cesarean section scar to get you to do whatever?
You intentionally put her through that, so of course, yes, yeah.
And um and I mean, I'll probably get more emotional as I get into this because I it's not like I was excitedly thinking about the story I was going to be telling of walking into this. It's obviously not fun to think about, but it was like having this bomb in the house, but I didn't know how long the fuse was.
Hmm.
I knew there was a bomb. I knew it was going to go off, but I never knew when. And I've been told a lot that I'm loud. Maybe you've already figured that out so far. And I likely get it from my mom because my mom had this voice of a banshee. And I remember I got hit occasionally. It wasn't very much. And honestly, the grief or trauma that I remember is very little to do with being hit and more to do with being screamed at. And I mean, I just remember like I would rather you hit me
Hmm.
than scream at me like this. And I would it was like she enjoyed humiliating me. And when I say enjoyed, like again, it was not infrequent that the joy was like gleeful. Like he isn't this so much fun? And I mean humiliating me just there in person or humiliating me in front of other people. And it was like she really enjoyed, somehow she got into her mind that the purpose of, the way that you raise a child is to discipline them. So you have to find things to correct and find things to discipline. And so it was like every question from her was a trap.
Hmm.
And I remember I would, if I knew I did something that she didn't want me to do, or would she would turn it into something I didn't want to do. And this is usually like when I went to see my dad on the weekend, every other weekend. Um, I would build these dependency trees in my head. It's like, okay, I know I'm going to walk in the door and she's going to ask me this. I better have an answer ready for that. And now with that answer, she could ask me this or she could ask me that. And I better have an answer ready for those two. And off those two, there could be two more offshoot questions. And I better have answers ready for those. And it's like, in however many levels deep I had to think, if it's 2, 3, maybe 4 levels deep, and made sure I had an answer ready for anything that happened. um it, I mean, you talk about having to walk on eggshells.
Hmm.
And it was just like she was just constantly probing. And if she ever found anything, it was like, okay, I'm going to take this away from you, I'm going to take that away from you, now you can't do this, now you can't do that. And it got to the point, because I know she would search through my room looking for stuff. And I mean, just to put this in perspective, I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't going to jail. I was a straight A student that didn't get into trouble. I'm not like a juvenile delinquent here. And I guess I forgot she was what do you call it? Not a parole officer, but a corrections
Corrections officer.
juvenile. Was
Okay.
that?
A
No,
corrections
she was
officer.
a corrective action officer, whatever you
Okay.
corrections officer, something like that for juveniles. So she went to school
Oh,
and she
okay.
worked all day. Um, maybe she got her kicks off of doing it that way, but I even remember like in my room, like, okay, here's a pen. If I was at my desk writing something and I wrote something I didn't want her to read, when I put my stuff away, I said, okay, if I leave my pen here, she's going to walk in and see that I had used a pen. Then she's going to start looking for what I had written. So instead of putting it here, I'm going to put it back over there so it looks like I never used it. All my thinking was like that. How do I cover my tracks? How do I cover my tracks? How do I have these dependency trees? How do I cover my tracks? How do I cover my tracks? Because like I said, it was just like this explosion. And what I found out at some point is that even if she couldn't find something on me, she'd make it up. But I recognized that it took her a little bit more effort to make it up. And so I guess that slowed it down. But yeah, it was just like living in this constant, how do I want to say it? Yeah, just this constant threat of this bomb going off. And it's not just that I didn't have any privacy. It was any vague suggestion that I might like some would be ruthlessly punished. And I remember in my room, so we had this hallway. Her bedroom was at the end of the hallway. Mine was at the beginning, and the bathroom was on the other side of my bedroom. So if she had to wake up to go to the bathroom, it was always I had to go by my room. And so I became very, very attenuated to the sound of her feet walking down the hallway. And I didn't know if she was going to the bathroom or if she was going to my room or both. And I would, and then if I was doing anything I wasn't supposed to, I had to listen for the feet and try to, undo whatever the heck I was doing. But what I was trying to get at in terms of the privacy was like when I changed my clothes, when I was naked, even as a little kid, teenager, or whatever, I would actually stand right by the door. So if she just opened, because it's not like she obviously didn't knock. She didn't like peek in and be like, "Hey, can I put?" It was just like, Kramer style from Seinfeld, or boom, she just opens the door. I'd hide behind the door, so if I was naked, she'd open the door and not see me because I'd be behind the door.
Right.
And I remember there was one time I accidentally locked the door because we had the ones where doorknob where you just push the button.
Right.
And so I closed the door and I accidentally locked it. And I was sitting on my bed and she came and went to open the door and obviously didn't open. And it wasn't like, hey, the door's locked. Not a chance to say sorry, not a chance to say it was an accident, just like immediately like pounding, like, you open this thing up right now. What do you think you're doing locking the door? It was yeah, it was like I was not allowed to have an independent thought.
Now, were you an only child? Were you the only
Yes.
kid in this home? Oh, so it's all focused on you.
It was all focused on me. So the dynamic expands. So let's add my grandparents into this. So my mom's parents lived across the street. And so I kind of grew up in two houses because I'm always just going across the street, that they're taking me to school and I'm hanging out there, or I'm hanging out at home or whatever. And again, I didn't realize this until I got older and I actually confronted my grandmother about it. My grandpa died a long time ago when I was 14. why was it that everybody acted like I was insane? So, I mean, if I ever tried to talk about what my mom was doing, or that maybe it was weird that my parents were divorced and they can't talk to each other. I mean, my mom and my dad touching the same sound waves was, you might as well have set off a nuclear bomb.
Mm,
I had to be the one to run messages back and forth.
I hate
And
that.
if I ran a message from my dad to my mom, and my mom didn't like the message, she'd yell at me and punish me. Um, Everybody acted like I was the one who was insane.
Rather than even acknowledging that she had serious issues.
Not only that, what I recognized is that they couldn't control her.
Hmm.
And because they couldn't control her, they tried to control me. If she had certain behavior, I was the one who had to make up for it. And the whole family, and this again, this is on my mom's side. My dad's side was different. On my mom's side, and my grandmother, so my mom's mom had 3 siblings that extended family, whatever. And just like, I wanted nothing to do with any family gathering because everybody would just dogpile me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, what I found out later is that nobody could control my mom. They couldn't control the behavior of my mom, so they looked to me to control me, which is essentially equivalent to saying, Dylan, the child, you are responsible for the situation, right? Because the one
Yeah.
who's responsible is the one who has to take action.
Yep.
And so when we mix in my dad with this, I mean, I saw him every other weekend. He was an alcoholic. He disappeared at some point when I was 14 for an explanation. I never got a clear reason for what happened, or a clear story for what happened. But I will give him credit for this, is that, I mean, there was more than once where he would tell me, like, Dylan, you are not insane. You are not insane. Like, what's going on in that house, it's not you, it's them. And I mean, if it weren't for that steam valve of my dad, again, like, I don't think I went over to his house one time where he wasn't drunk the whole time.
Yeah.
And he could never get his life together. Just constantly financial issues. I mean, he didn't stay in one house for more than 2 years during this entire time, constantly moving, but fighting with a girlfriend, breaking up and getting back together with the same girlfriend over and over and over again. And but if it weren't for that valve of him, just like, when you're here, just don't worry. When you're with me every weekend, just relax. I'm not going to get on top of you like she does. Which is one of the things my mom would punish me for, because I know you talk to your dad, but you won't talk to me.
Yeah. Well, he knew what she was
Whose
like.
fault is that, right?
Yeah. He'd obviously spent years with her too. If he was, you were 4 when he left, so he knew what she was like.
Yeah. So again, it was like, to have a personal thought. I mean, again, it was like, if I was told to do something, I didn't like it. If I showed a facial expression or whatever, I didn't like it. It was just immediate hellfire from her.
Yeah. So I know that you eventually, if I'm remembering what I read about you here, you actually ended up taking a long-term trip away, kind of like to get away from things. So
So yeah, and then again, I was able to put together what I did in retrospect. Right, in the moment, I didn't really understand what I was doing. I went to college at Western Washington University in Bellingham, and at Bellingham, Washington. My degree was in chemistry, and I had a job at an oil refinery up there as a laboratory technician while I was in college, and I had a guaranteed job upon graduation. And I I woke up one day and I was like, I am completely coasting on everybody else's expectations of me. And okay, I hate this job. I don't necessarily like this. I mean, I don't have anything wrong with Bellingham. I'm just saying I don't want to live there, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to live in this area. And okay, with the amount of income I'd be making, I could buy a house that I really don't like and get a car so I could drive in between the house I don't like and the job I don't like. I'm like, whose idea was this?
Right.
This is a terrible idea. And I graduated in 2009, which was right when the crash happened. And I was one of the people lucky enough to have a job, and I quit. And I mean, I'll try to not make this too long of a story. I ended up living at a Shinto shrine for 6 months in Granite Falls. I was heavily into Aikido. I got into this whole Shinto thing. I bought a one-way plane ticket. I moved to Vermont to stay with some friends. I stayed there for about a year. And again, I bought another one-way plane ticket to Europe. And I ended up just staying there for 2.5 years. And what I noticed was, first and foremost, I always had a sleeping issue. Like falling asleep, I'd just be in bed for hours trying to get myself to go to sleep. The further away I moved from Washington, the easier it got for me to sleep. And I was like, oh, this is an interesting
Yes. Turn of events.
consequence. Yes. And one of the things my mom always made clear to me that her love was conditional. Do what I want, or I'm kicking you out. Do what I want, or I'm taking this away. Do what I want, or I mean, that was the whole thing. If I have any leverage over you whatsoever, I'm going to fully use that leverage, against you to get you to do what I want. And so I had the wherewithal when I left. I said, I just need to get rid of as much of this leverage as possible. Anything that she has over me, I just have to get rid of it so she can't use this lever against me. And as I traveled around Europe, I started off by staying on farms. I found this network online. It's called helpx.net, if anyone's ever interested, where farmers post listings and they say, hey, we need this certain work done. And if you come do the work, we'll let you stay and feed you for free. I mean, you're working for it, but I mean, you don't have to pay any money to sit, right? And so I'm like, man, with this, I could travel a long time. I don't mind working to help out. And I kept bouncing from farm to farm because there would be some tension at some point. I mean, you're going to have tension between anybody, right? I'm not criticizing the people I stayed with over this, but I was afraid to address any tension because deep down, I felt that if I ever had a disagreement with someone providing something for me, in this case, these people were, I mean, I didn't see it in the context of like it's a mutual exchange.
Yeah.
Right. I saw this in a context of their giving me the benefit.
Right.
And that was another one I learned from mom. My labor is worth nothing. My actions are worth nothing. So here I felt that what I was doing was worth nothing. And so I was afraid to bring up the tensions because I thought I'd get kicked out. And so once the tension got too high, I exited. I found an escape route and exited. And I did that for a while. And I remember I'm some point I'm staying with this blacksmith in northeastern Austria. And there was another guy, American, there as well. And I was vacuuming the floor. And the light turned on the vacuum to say it needed to be emptied, and I didn't see it. And the blacksmith, he's like, "What are you doing? The light's on. That means if you keep vacuuming, it's gonna break the vacuum." And he grabs it and takes it outside to empty it. And I'm like, I know what the light means. I didn't see it. Right? And I'm standing there, and you can probably see the steam coming off of my hair. I'm so mad, right? But I'm keeping my mouth shut. And I remember his name was Tarek. Tarek was like, "Dude, say something." And I kind of shook my head. I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Say something." And it didn't occur to me to say something. And when the guy walked back in, I'm like, "Hey, I know what the light does. I just didn't see it." He went, "Oh, okay, sorry." Right? And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't realize I could do that." So the time spent gone. First and foremost, I took away that leverage. I got far enough away, and you're kind of able to reinvent yourself because there's nobody there who has the slightest idea about you. They don't have the slightest significance, iota of idea about you. And I remember I did all these things. I wrote stories and took pictures and, I'm in Austria this week and now I'm in Bulgaria freezing my head off. And now I'm in Turkey and now I'm in Germany, all the sorts of stuff. And I remember I'd call home on Christmas or whatever. And this is back before we all had these cell phones and I can just call anybody whenever I wanted to, right? We had to coordinate a time that where both sides are going to get on Skype to do the video call that's super grainy. And I, for Christmas or whatever, I'd make this call and everyone's like, well, what are you doing? Read your stories or see your pictures, all this stuff. When you coming home? I'm like, I don't know, whatever I feel like it. What are you guys doing? Nothing. What are you guys doing? Nothing. And even though they told me that, it didn't occur to me that they were literally doing nothing. And that when I finally came back, I was gone for 3.5 years. I never visited once back home. I was gone for 3.5 years. I came back and it never occurred to me that they literally were exactly the same. Like,
didn't have an
I left,
to change them. They stayed the same. So of course they were.
Well, so yeah. I left. I grew. I had all these in quotes adventures. I did all these things to challenge my personality. I show up to another country. I lived in Austria. I didn't speak a word of German when I got there. I'm pretty rusty now. It's been a long time, but I was very conversational in German by the time I came back. And what occurred while I was gone, before I get to there, I started studying intellectual self-defense. And typically if you were to type that into the internet, you'll probably come up with formal logic, a course on formal logic, which is what I was getting into. Here's how to create an idea. Here's how to spot a fallacy. Here's how to know when someone's argument doesn't make sense, that sort of thing, right? So I'd been reading about this sort of stuff. And I had also, I'll try to incorporate that in a sec. So I'm reading about this idea of intellectual self-defense and arguments that do or don't make sense. And so I come back, and what was fascinating to me were the people, Mom was obviously one of these people, that were like, I'm going to immediately put you back in the same box I remember you coming out of. Do I have to show you my cesarean section scar to get you to say that you love me? Sort of stuff. And I just wasn't having it. I was just like, I'm totally not interested in this whatsoever. And I took people to task. And what I found out, I found out a lot of stuff, but in this certain point is that when it comes to manipulation, and I'll for the lack of a better term, we'll say that the narcissist is kind of the apex of the manipulator, right? And there's certain levels below that.
Yeah.
When it comes to manipulation, most people are pretty lazy and they kind of require you to self-censor and to self-attack, but with little quips. Not all people like that. Some are more aggressively bully-like, but particularly my family, there was a lot of this stuff. And when I saw it, I just started calling it out, and I wouldn't care if there was people watching. And what I found out quickly is that between my friends and my family that I remembered, that I'm coordinating with when I came back, they fell into two groups. The first group was, wait a minute, I'm having a different interaction with this person, Dylan, and maybe I need to rethink how I interact with him.
Right.
I still talk to those people. The second group were people that they would rather die than change the way that they interacted with you. They might back off for a second. Like, okay, in this specific moment, I'm obviously losing here, but the second they thought they had something to hold with, they take it. And for me, call it your Good Grief podcast, because I remember looking at the description, and this is what I thought of, is that for me, this was kind of the defining moment where I'm like, you're all out.
Yeah.
I don't need you guys. Now that I can identify this stuff rudimentarily, I've gotten better at it. Now that I can identify when this manipulation happens, I'm not putting up with it. Mm-hmm. And if you're ability to have a relationship with another human being can only exist on this manipulative dimension. I am not interested in having you near me.
Yeah. Now, how did that go over, especially with like mom?
Sorry, I'm laughing.
Well, I'm guessing not well, but
No, she did something that pissed me off, and I don't know how much time you want for the recording. I had enough, and I wrote a scathing letter. I recorded it of me talking, and I sent the letter and the recording to every single family member email address that I had. And the point that I was trying to make was, this thing where you and I fight, or you try to manipulate me, and then you can turn around and face the world and act like there's a different face to it. I'm going to take that away from you. I'm not afraid of this interaction being shown to everybody else.
mm-hmm.
So if you want to interact with me the way you are, let it be known that everybody else gets to see it. I believe I was 27 or 28 when that happened. 37 now. And minus the one example I'm about to tell you, I have not interacted with my mom at all in between. And for a while, I'd get text message. What is it? Were we getting text messages back then? This is 2013. Yeah, I guess it's text messages. Text messages back then. I'm getting text messages. I'm getting emails. And I'll give my first tip to anybody who's, I'm sure, experienced this. If you get a text message and you get an email and it's a text wall, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. You get a text wall, never read it. Never read it. The only thing in there is to spin you up and manipulate you.
Yeah. I've gotten those. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And if you don't believe me, just read the first sentence. I don't know why they always stick it in the first sentence. There's something about that first sentence that puts you down a peg. And then they'll get into whatever it is that they're theoretically want to talk about. And the reason they put that in the first sentence to take you down a peg, even though you're over emotional, I'm gonna write this email. Even though you're an idiot and you did something really stupid, I'm gonna write this email. Even though whatever the thing is that takes you down a peg, the reason they do that is that's the initial attack, showing that you're beneath them. Then they distract you with details and arguments. And no matter how you respond to those arguments, because you did not respond to the initial attack, they can always fall back on the attack. Well, you're over emotional. Whatever you say, yeah, you're just, like I said at the beginning, you're being over emotional, and now you're being over emotional now, right? And so I don't know if it has to be this way, but I've never not seen it not be right there in the first sentence. And so we talked about intellectual self-defense, and I mean, maybe we could plug it later, but I believe I've developed a system of intellectual self-defense that goes beyond the classical, learn your formal logic and stuff. Not criticizing formal logic. It's a component of what I talk about, but I don't think it's enough, because I found out that let's say someone's manipulating you, and you're like, aha, I spotted the fallacy. It is a straw man fallacy. It's a poisoned well fallacy. It's a whatever fallacy. And you tell them. They usually don't care. You're committing such and such a fallacy. Well, yeah, I'm manipulating you. Like, what are you going to do about it? Or if they're really good, and a narcissist is really good, they'll spin it on you where they got you so tripped up that you've committed the fallacy.
Yeah.
Right? Is that if they're going to manipulate you, what that really is an emotional attack. It's an emotional form of dominance, which is creating a win-lose situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the trick is, so that they put the emotional form of dominance, but then they put out like the argument, the thing that's supposed to distract you. Here's the thing that we're supposed to be talking about, the discussion. If you focus on that discussion, you lost, because they already dominated you, and you're trying to explain your way backwards. What I've learned to do is, again, if I would chose to interact with the, in quotes, text wall, or more importantly, someone verbally in front of me, that first sentence where I see that first attack, I only focus on that. I refuse to talk about any semantic anything until we address the fact that you're dominating me right now. And if you want to keep pushing it, I'm prepared to fight back. Normally, you say something like that, people back off so fast. I mean, it'll make your head spin. So I learned to talk to everybody that way. I mean, not everybody, but the people who manipulate me. And what I've found out now, looking in retrospect, is unless I'm having a discussion like this right now, I honestly don't think about that sort of stuff that much anymore, because I feel like I so effectively applied it and got rid of the manipulative people out of my life that I don't have to think about it that much anymore.
And you'd recognize them the first time they step in if a new person comes along, right? So it's kind of like you're not going to develop that relationship. It's like, nope,
right.
nope.
Yeah, I could spot it. I could spot it so far away now. And just to bring my mom back into this, because what are the things a narcissist does? And again, I want to clarify, there's someone who manipulates isn't necessarily a narcissist. A narcissist is like this hyper God manipulator status person. Is they will spin your head up so fast. They have no shame. This is the part that really gets to me. They have no shame, and they will not hesitate when they respond to you. What I mean by that is, for example, if I'm lying to you about something right now and you figure it out and you call me out at lying, I experience shame, right? I feel bad for what I did. And it's a form of weakness that I project that onto others. I expect others to experience shame if I catch them at something. A narcissist does not experience that shame.
No, they don't.
So if you try to shame them, I mean, it just passes through them like nothing. And then second, if they give you a stupid argument and you give them like this ironclad response back, that's like, you can't beat this argument, I got it. It's not just that they say something back, they will say it back immediately. No hesitation, and it could be the stupidest thing you've ever heard, but they'll say it back so fast and with so much confidence, even though you know it's stupid, even though you know they're a narcissist, even though you know that you had an ironclad argument, it'll still spin you up.
Yeah. So you do work now with people to help them to see when they're being manipulated and so on. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, before we tell you about that, I just want to kind of end the story about my mom, because you spend 10 years away, and then of course society comes and like, oh, it's your mom, you got to give her, it's your mom, what if your mom, you can't just do that to your mom, oh, it's your mom, right? I take them to task too, but it starts to seep in. You're like, okay, am I the one being overreactive? So let me tell you the in quotes how this ended. My cousin gets married. He's about 7 years younger than me. And when I came back from Europe, we were finally both adults. Before then, we were always too far apart in age to interact with each other that much. And he knew my mom was crazy. His mom was crazy too, but I think mine was like another order of magnitude above his. And he was the only family member on that side of the family who had ever listened to me without just blowing me off. Right. So when he gets married, he invites my mom to the wedding. And I'm like, Calvin, what are you doing? What are you doing? She's like, I talked to her. She said that she wouldn't do anything. And I'm like, Calvin, this is my mom. What are you doing? So I've got 3 kids now, but I had 2 kids when this wedding happened. They're like 2 and 3 or something. And I'm like, my mom shall have no contact with my kids whatsoever. Nothing. I have a duty to protect them from that sort of thing. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, my mom's here. Oh, shit. And so I go to this wedding, and I'm just like hyper vigilant again, listening for those feet walking down the hallway about my mom coming. Oh, she promised she wouldn't say anything, that she's not going to interact with you. She's not going to do this. She's not going to do that. So the wedding happens. I'm one of the what the heck, groomsmen.
Groomsmen. Yeah.
My mom's right in front of me. I refuse to look at her. And then afterward, I'm with all the people in the after party, whatever you call it. I go to so few weddings, I don't even know what these things are called. But
Call reception.
I'm kneeling down, I'm talking to my kids, and all of a sudden I hear my mom. She's leaning right over me. And she says, "Oh, you don't have to give me the stink eye." And I look up and I'm kind of like, is she really doing this? And she starts looking at my daughter, the first time she's met her granddaughter, right? And starts being nice to her. And then I'm like, Mom, I don't want you around my kids. Can I ask why? I said, because you treated me like shit when I was a kid. You know what she did to me? I know you and I are on video and the listeners aren't going to see this, but she did this, where drooped her eye down and stuck her tongue out at me and stormed away. And now I'm bristling, right? I'm like, okay, how like am I going to ruin this wedding? Because I'm about to ruin this wedding. Right? Like I am prepared to make a scene, and it's not gonna. No one's gonna be happy, right? And she comes back to me and she goes, "Well, can I at least talk to your wife?"
Had she met your wife before?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, and then I'm sorry, I missed an important point. She the stick out the tongue thing was actually after she asked me about the wife. The first part was she said, I said, I don't want you around my kids, and she stormed off going, "Well, maybe I should file for custody then. I'll see you in court."
Oh, wow. Okay.
Remember what I just said about no hesitation? And then they tell you the most, like, what does that even mean? You're going to file for custody. What are you talking about? Right. But they'll say it's no hesitation, no shame, and full confidence when they say it. And it'll now, luckily, like, I've got like a second aspect of myself watching the first aspect going, okay, she did it. That's what happened. But it still spins you up. So the second time she comes over, she wants to, if she could talk to my wife. And I'm like, I don't think she wants to talk to you. That's what I say, because you treated me like shit as a child. And then she did the face thing and walked away. And that's when my meter went over the threshold. I don't know what I was going to do, but I started yelling and I came after her. And I guess by the grace of God, my uncle, so her brother, who's a big man, grabbed me by the shoulder and he's like, calm it down. And I mean, my blood's like boiling and I'm just about to do whatever the hell that I was going to do. And so after the wedding, all the people came to me going, I can't believe your mom did that. Because one of the lucky things about my uncle standing right there, he saw the whole interaction. He saw that she started it, right? We can't believe your mom did that. Oh my God. And it's like, I tell you people things and you don't listen to me. Right. And this goes back to, I'm the one that has to change my behavior. Right? Okay, Dylan, your mom's going to be there. I need you to calm down. No, I'm not calming down. If she's there, I let everybody know after that. I'm like, if you invite her to something again and I'm there, I will initiate. I will be the one who's uncontrollable. So have fun. Sorry, I'm hyped up.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. Sometimes just retelling the story, it's just kind of get you all fired up.
And then what also gets me is like she learned nothing after 10 years of me not talking to her. Zero. And I mean, I guess I felt vindicated that I was right. That I shouldn't have her anywhere near me.
Well, one thing that strikes me in that story, Dylan, is you mentioned about how everybody in the family thought you were the crazy one and you were the wrong one and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And now here we are in this episode, where you're an adult and you stand up for yourself and they're coming over and telling you that they see that she was the one that did something wrong. So they're no longer thinking that you're the one who's the crazy one or the bad one or the wrong one, whatever, because they've witnessed.
And I think I know why. And the explanation is not, I don't think anyone's going to like the explanation, is because now that I've stood up for myself and now that I've shown I'm dangerous to interact with. I'm not thinking like I'm going to hit you or something, but it's like, okay, we can't just go to Dylan and shame him and say, okay, you need to keep control of yourself. You need to do this. Oh no, he's going to jump up and make a scene. Well, shit. Maybe it's easier to control Leslie. That's what Mom's saying.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's easier to control the mom. You know, we're not rational creatures first. We're hierarchical creatures first. And this is part of what I teach. And I know you were trying to get to that. Sorry, I sidetracked. This is what I tell people, and I think I'm right, is that before you can get to rational, you have to establish that I am not willing to be dominated. Because if the person tried to dominate you and you don't establish that, the irrational, or not the irrational, the rational is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're just, the whole rational thing is them just trying to distract you from the fact that they're manipulating you and they don't want you to defend yourself. So
how do people end up coming to you for that training or assistance? I mean, where
you know, oops, can you see me?
Yep.
I bumped a cable. So I recently made a 3-part presentation going over basically my theory of intellectual self-defense, how it works and how you can apply it. And it really, and I mean, if you haven't figured it out, it came from me observing my family.
Yeah.
Part of the story I left out, but observing my family. And at some point I recognized patterns in the manipulation. And I said, okay, there's 5 common patterns here that if you recognize these patterns, suddenly, I mean, you can start seeing it left and right super fast. And so I did a 3-part presentation. It's on my website, iread.tv. I put it on my YouTube channel. If you search iread.tv, it's there. If someone wanted to email me, because I mean, it's one thing to listen to it. I guess it's another thing to okay, I listened to that. How do I apply it myself? My contact information is on iread.tv. You can Dylan, Dylan at iread.tv. If for some reason you felt you wanted more after the listening
we'll
to
those, we'll put all those contact links in the notes too, so people can find it easy.
But I think it scares people a lot of the time, because when people think of intellectual self-defense, they think they need to win an argument. And maybe you could do that on a debate stage where people think that's what you're supposed to be doing. But it has more to do with, I mean, I'll be straight about it, being ready to get in somebody's face. And people are terrified of that. And how do you get into a state where you are where you're able to do that with yourself? How do you get emotionally strong enough where you're able to take somebody on like that? That's tough. And I think it needs practice, and it needs I mean, it's like I said, it's one thing to understand it. It's another thing to do it. So I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, you're doing great. Because I really I was curious, how do people find you? I mean, how do they know? How do I recognize I am being manipulated, or I let myself be manipulated, and I need to find someone who can help me, combat that? How does that?
Well, I mean, if you're asking me how my marketing skills are, they're terrible.
Right. No, I mean, if I'm a person who's, let's say, and I know before we started recording, I shared with you my experience with a narcissist. I didn't realize a lot of those during those years what was happening. I had no idea. I didn't realize until years later that, oh my gosh, this person was manipulating the crap out of me for years, and I didn't see it. I mean, to the point where it was my self-esteem, my self-worth, everything was impacted by this relationship. I didn't recognize that at the time. So I'm saying, if that's someone listening to this now and they say, oh, that actually is happening to me, or I'm in a relationship with someone who's doing that to me, or whatever. How do they recognize that that there's help or whatever? There's something that I'm not talking, but I mean, how do they say, okay, there must be something out there that I can do about this?
Well, I mean, the first part is recognizing it. That was really, really the big thing for me, is that, and let's see if I can boil down. It's 3 presentations, it's 6 hours total. Let's see if I can boil it down to like 3 sentences here. Is that when it comes to, we have a rational aspect of ourselves, which is win-win. or it can be win-win. This is the issue I'm having. This is the issue you're having. Can we come up with a solution where we both win? We both walk away happy, right? Then there's the emotional dominance aspect of ourselves where I'm in charge, you do as I say, and that's it, or vice versa, right? This is the key component that people don't understand, and they actually typically get backwards. If someone's on that rational component and another person's on that emotional component, and those two components smash into each other, the rational component evaporates. It does nothing to the interaction. The interaction is now an emotional interaction, and it's a win-lose interaction. The other person's trying to win. Now, manipulation, I like to use the term sophistry. I haven't said it at this point. Manipulation or sophistry usually involves pretending to be rational. So I'm trying to emotionally dominate you and create a win-lose interaction. At the same time, I'm trying to trick you to engage in that win-win interaction. But like I just said, if the two collide, the win-win just evaporates.
Yeah.
And so if I can convince you to stay on that win-win interaction, I win by default. Because you're not defending yourself. Right? Most people think that, okay, I don't want to get down into like fighting. I don't want to get down into playing their game. So I'm gonna take the high road and try be reasonable through this interaction. You lose if you do that. You lose and you look weak to anybody else who's watching, and so anybody else who's watching will typically take the side of the manipulator.
Mm-hmm.
And so, which is what I described as a kid, right? I mean, everybody jumped on me, and so it gets even more terrifying here is if anybody else is watching or gets involved later, is that if you try to defend yourself or you successfully defend yourself, they're going to blame you for starting the fight because they can't recognize any of this.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be prepared to fight the person that you're fighting and everybody else who's going to dogpile you after the fact.
Yeah.
And so in terms of, I think this is happening to me. I mean, unless you want me to do like the 6-hour presentation right here, like in terms of how to identify that, go listen to my presentations on that. But it starts with, do you ever feel like you're losing a conversation? You're yes. Like, I thought we're having a conversation. Why do I feel like I'm losing this? Right? Do you ever feel like you're backtracking? Do you feel like you're explaining yourself? Now, just because you're feeling that doesn't necessarily mean you're being manipulated, but it should be you time to like, okay, let's put the red flag up and observe what's going on here. And I think if you use the tools that I talk about in my presentations, that you can pretty quickly identify it. Now, identification is one thing. What do you do about it after you identify it? That's a whole different can of worms. The identification is pretty formulaic, but like what do you do about it is all dependent on what exactly is going on. Like if it's your husband or your wife or your kid, what you choose to do is a whole heck of a lot different from a colleague or a friend.
Yeah.
Right. Like I mean, I express kind of a combative style. I don't take that with my wife, right? even if I feel like she might be manipulating me a little bit, and it's not like I'm free. It's not like I don't ever do that to other people too. There's nobody's ever like I'm perfectly rational. I never manipulate anybody. My arguments are perfectly clear and spent. I understand nobody's like that, right? But yeah, if you think it's happening to you, I mean, it probably is because most people don't recognize this. So you have some relationships in your life that are set up like this. And I would recommend watching through the 3-part series. It'll give you the tools to learn how to identify it. And I discuss a little bit, what to do about it once you have identified it. But the number one thing is to stop being reasonable. Because you just lose if you continue being reasonable.
Yeah, you got to kind of be thinking different than how you've done it before, how you've done it in the past, because clearly it's not working, right? It's like if you continually to be manipulated, it's whatever conversation you're trying to have, like try to talk the person down or try to be rational with them, whatever it might be, just doesn't get you anywhere.
Let me give an example. So this, I actually love it when people say this to me now because I have the perfect response to it, which dispels it immediately. You ever had somebody tell you after you've gotten upset at them about how they're talking to you, and they say, well, this is the way I talk? You ever experienced that one?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know what the proper response to that is? Well, this is the way I talk to someone who talks to me like that.
There you go. Meeting fire with
suddenly they can change.
Yeah.
So suddenly they just start talking differently all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think most people who do this sort of stuff, they're used to these little tricks working. So when someone stands up to them, they're like, whoa, this isn't what I signed up for.
Yeah, exactly.
But like if you listen to the presentations, this is the way I talk is it's an appeal to determinism, right? It's something that you can control, but you're acting like you can't. And if you can't control it, that means I have to. It pushes the responsibility that you have over yourself onto me, because we're in a place where we're at a impasse, right? I want you to change your behavior. You don't want to change your behavior. Both of these can't happen at the same time. One has to give away. If you are unable to give away, if it is physically impossible for you to give away, then I have to. So what the person is saying, well, this is the way I talk and I can't change. Therefore, you have to. Right? Well, if that's a magical power that person has, you can just claim the same thing, and all of a sudden their whole gig falls apart.
This is powerful stuff. This is very powerful.
I know. I get excited about it.
I mentioned it before we started recording. I learned something from every guest I have on this show. It's like I'm just like fascinated by these topics. But anyway, before we go, is there? Like I said, we're going to link to your website, podcast, so on and so forth, so people can, I'm interested in hearing your presentations myself. So, they can listen to that, figure out what's helpful and so on. So I super appreciate having you as a guest on my show.
Well, I appreciate you let me on, and I guess I could just give a warning with the presentations, is that if the information has any similar effect on you as it had on me, be prepared to have a lot of relationships lost.
Yeah. Well, you know what? But are they really a loss, right? I mean, is it really a loss? That's kind of the way it goes, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things I've learned in my life for sure, is that certain things really aren't a loss. They really are a benefit in the game. So
good point.
Yes. But thank you so much, Dylan. Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Grief. To hear more about my personal story, please pick up a copy of my book, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival, available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible via Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online book retailers.